For this video, there's going to be sources in the comments. So if you would like to look at any of the research that I have taken a look at and gathered for the making of this video, they will be in the comments and they will be linked. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be going over the worst things Trump has done so far. I'm going to give a bit of a disclaimer and say that the specific events and figures are largely based on documented reporting, but the overall framing is morally based and meant to be persuasive. So take that as you will. Most people think the worst things Trump has done are a pile of disconnected controversies, from tweets to riots to scandals over money, which, of course, could never possibly be symptoms of a single personality. You might see family separation at the border, the storming of the Capitol, or the handling of COVID-19, and they can seem like separate stories. But when you look closer, they flow from the same habits: cruelty toward vulnerable people, casual dishonesty, and using public office to serve himself. In this video, you'll see 5 ways that one more pattern shows up in his decisions and public behavior. By the end, you'll be able to spot that pattern whenever you encounter another Trump headline. This is where Trump's approach to immigration turned families, and especially children, into warning signs instead of people. His administration's 2018 zero tolerance policy prosecuted all adults who crossed the southern border illegally, which, because children could not be held in the same jails, led to thousands of children being taken from their parents. Because what better way to combat crime than by turning toddlers into human billboards? By June 2018, more than 2,300 children had been separated under this strategy. According to NPR, in later investigations, found that over 5,000 children were separated in total. Medical and human rights experts described this as punitive and cruel, and warned of severe long-term harm to children's mental health, attachment, and development. The mechanism here is very simple. He uses intense suffering as a deterrent for other families who might try to come later. Officials openly described family separation as a tough deterrent, and human rights bodies and scholars argued that this choice violated basic principles of child protection and human dignity. When a government decides that terrifying children is an acceptable policy tool, it teaches everyone watching that some lives count less than a political message. You can see the same moral pattern in his language about immigrants and even grieving families. In 2018, he referred to immigrant children as future criminals who should be held in prison-like tender age facilities, framing them more as threats than as kids. Nothing says thoughtful policy like treating a 5-year-old like a prison gang audition tape. In 2016, he responded to Gold Star parents Khizr and Ghazala Khan, whose son died serving in Iraq, by suggesting the mother may not have been allowed to speak because of her Muslim faith. Comments that drew condemnation from Republicans, veterans groups, and other Gold Star families who called his remarks out of bounds and void of decency. A textbook example of how to turn national grief into a PR focus group problem. From a moral standpoint, this is the same move. Strip people of empathy and treat their pain as something you can dismiss when it's just politically inconvenient. Here, Trump's choices around honesty reshape how you, the public, relate to basic facts. Fact checkers at major outlets documented an unprecedented volume of false or misleading claims from him during his first term. One detailed count recorded, okay, are you ready? 30,573 such claims over about 4 years, which averaged to about 21 a day, according to the Washington Post. At that rate, even the Truthometer would have to get its own intervention group. These are not just slips in interviews. Researchers tracked repeated, debunked claims that he continued to repeat even after they had been clearly disproven. The mechanism is to make shared reality feel optional. This shows that Trump's version of democracy is now available in both the reality and fan fiction versions. The reality version is a little bit more expensive because it's harder for him to accept that part. When a leader constantly repeats false statements and refuses to correct them, it becomes harder for you to sort out what is real, easier for supporters to dismiss criticism at bias, and easier for serious abuses to hide inside the noise. Scholars have compared this style to classic white-collar and, guess what, political corruption, where denying clear facts becomes part of neutralizing accountability. From a moral perspective, this matters because democratic self-government depends on people having some common ground about what actually happened. When that ground erodes, responsibility becomes blurry and harm spreads more easily. You can see the impact in specific cases, like his repeated false claims that the 2020 election was stolen, which courts, state officials, and federal investigators rejected over and over. Those claims did not just express concern, they primed millions of people to see a lawful process as illegitimate and set the stage for actual danger. In this case, Trump's words and actions served to channel his supporters' anger into a direct attack on democratic institutions. For weeks before January 6, 2021, he told supporters that the election had been stolen and that they had to stop the steal, even though courts and election officials across the country found no evidence that would change the result, which is an impressive copyrighted way for Trump to convert a peaceful transfer of power into a live-action escape room for democracy. On the morning of January 6, he addressed a large crowd in Washington, D.C., repeated the false landslide victory claim, and urged them to march on the Capitol, saying things like, "You'll never take back your country with weakness," and "fight like HE double hockey sticks." Don't want to get struck down by YouTube. Researchers and watchdog groups have since documented that at least 210 people charged in the Capitol attack said they believed they were following Trump's calls when they came to Washington and joined the riot, according to Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Legal scholars and public policy experts have argued that his conduct was the proximate cause of the assault on the Capitol, and the House of Representatives impeached him for incitement of insurrection. The mechanism here is morally obvious. Take a grievance built on false claims, inflame it in front of the people you know include armed and radicalized groups, and then aim that energy at the very process that makes peaceful transfers of power possible. What makes this one of his worst acts from a moral standpoint is not only the violence on that day, but the signal it sent about the value of democratic rules compared to personal power. When supporters see a president treat violence or the threat of it as a legitimate tool for staying in office, respect for law and peaceful disagreement can erode far beyond a single event. Sometimes Trump's choices about money and power change how public office relates to private profit. Unlike previous modern presidents, he kept ownership of his businesses while in office and routed them into a trust that still allowed him to withdraw profits. Ethics experts warned from the beginning that this setup conflicted with the Constitution's emoluments clause. I don't really know how to say that. Which are meant to block presidents from receiving payments or advantages from foreign governments and from the federal or state governments beyond their salary. Lawsuits from watchdog groups and members of Congress argued that by continuing to accept payments as properties frequented by foreign officials and domestic political actors, he was violating those clauses. Investigations later found that his businesses received millions of dollars from foreign governments during his presidency, including at least about $5.5 million linked to Chinese government entities alone, according to Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Researchers at ethics organizations described this as a direct threat to impartial decision making because foreign governments could show favor or seek influence simply by spending at his properties. Because nothing stabilizes international relations like a president's Yelp review score. The mechanism is that every presidential decision touching those governments sits under a shadow. Is this about the public interest or about a customer relationship that benefits his bottom line? From a moral standpoint, treating public power as a channel for private gain turns citizens into bystanders in someone else's business plan. It erodes trust that decisions about war, trade, or diplomacy are made with the country's well being in mind rather than the balance sheet of a family company. Finally, Trump's handling of COVID 19 shows his pattern of denial and image management can change the way leaders respond to life in action death crises. Early in 2020, he told the public that the virus was under control and would disappear, even as experts warned that it was more dangerous than the seasonal flu. In a recorded interview released later, he admitted to journalist Bob Woodward that he intentionally played down the severity of the virus despite knowing it was highly lethal, saying he preferred to play it down to avoid panic. Public health scholars at Harvard and elsewhere criticize this approach, arguing that minimizing a proven threat delayed serious action and contributed to tens of thousands of deaths, according to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. The mechanism is that when a president publicly soft pedals a pandemic, contradicts health officials, and promotes unproven treatments, it confuses people about the real level of risk and weakens support for effective measures like masks, distancing, and clear communication. Analyses of his administration's communication found repeated false statements about the virus, optimistic claims that went against internal warnings, and a tendency to prioritize short-term political image over long-term public health. From a moral point of view, the problem is not just that mistakes were made. Those happen in any crisis, but that he chose to manage perception instead of leveling with people about a danger that hit low-income and minority communities particularly hard. When leaders treat truth as negotiable during a pandemic, it teaches you that your safety is secondary to how calm or successful they look on television. That is a deep moral failure because it places reputation above the lives and health of the people they serve. Looking at these 5 examples, you can see that the common thread is a system that prioritizes personal power, image, and advantage over empathy, truth, and shared rules. Whether the subject is a migrant child, a grieving parent, a fact checker, a public health expert, or Congress certifying an election, the underlying move is the same. Reduce others to obstacles or tools instead of recognizing their inherent dignity. The system works in the short term because it changes how people and institutions respond to his words. Supporters rally. Critics struggle to keep up with the volume of false claims, and watchdog mechanisms get strained. But the same structure can look very different on the surface depending on the context. Family separation feels like immigration policy. January 6 feels like security and law enforcement. Emoluments feel like technical constitutional law. COVID messaging feels like public health. If you focus only on the outcomes, Trump's moral record can look chaotic and unpredictable, a long list of unrelated controversies. Unless, of course, you know that chaotic and unpredictable is just the corporate branding for the same moral pattern every time. If you focus on the mechanism, how he treats truth, vulnerable people, and constraints on his power, you see that his choices are remarkably consistent across time and issue areas. Next time you see Trump in the news, do not just look at the immediate result, a soundbite, a policy, a rally crowd. Ask yourself which of these 5 patterns is showing up. Is this about dehumanizing someone, flooding the conversation with falsehoods, stoking dangerous anger, blurring public duty and private gain, or playing down a real threat? You do not need to memorize the list. You just need to recognize the system underneath it. Once you see that pattern, you are not just watching what Trump did this week. You are understanding the moral logic behind it and can decide for yourself what that says about the kind of leadership you want to accept. Because nothing says American politics like spreading over 30,000 lies. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, and only if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, or comment, or share. I would love those too, but only if you enjoyed the video, of course. I hope you have a good day, and I hope you come back to watch another video. Goodbye.